Welcome to another episode of Well-Adjusted Mama. I'm your host, Dr. Laura Brayton, and today's guest is Dr. Stephen Cowan MD, speaking on holistic treatment for chronically sick children. Stephen Cowan MD is a board-certified pediatrician with over 30 years of clinical experience working with children. He is a subspecialty in developmental pediatrics and is a fellow in the American Academy of Pediatrics, serving as a member of the AAP section on developmental disabilities. He is a clinical instructor at NY Medical College and a member of the American Academy of Medical Acupuncture. He has lectured internationally and is the author of Fire Child, Water Child: How Understanding the 5 Types of ADHD Can Help You Improve Your Child's Self-Esteem and Attention. Dr. Cowan has developed a unique holistic approach to evaluating and treating children struggling with chronic physical, emotional, and cognitive disorders that integrates the principles of Chinese medicine. He has a consultation practice in both Manhattan and Westchester, New York. He is the medical director of the nonprofit Tournesol Kids that envisions a world where all children are heroes, inspired to grow and discover well-being by celebrating their unique powers and learning to share them with the world. During today's recording with Dr. Cowan, unfortunately, we got lost connection and we lost the first few minutes of the recording. So I just wanted to share the Cliff Notes version of how he told me about his start as a traditional pediatrician and how the medical school training really conditioned him to have a fear-based knowledge of how to diagnose and treat children. And through his background in meditation, he was able to observe the children in his practice and learn from them as his teacher about how they deserve to be recognized as individuals and really to highlight their gifts and their abilities as opposed to focusing on their disabilities and their labels, and how through that and empowering the parent to support the child, he was able to create massive shifts in that child's ability to heal and become fully functioning members of society. It's a beautiful episode. I hope you enjoy. Hello, Stephen. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you on today.
Thank you, Laura. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so you and I connected a few years ago at a Tournesol Kids event in the city, and I was really impressed with you as a person and as a practitioner and a healer, and all the work that you've really committed yourself to over the past 3 decades in helping chronically ill children heal.
Yeah, I love meeting people who are practitioners like you who have dedicated themselves to, real health, or what we'll call whole health, as opposed to the diseased model that we were all trained in. We don't really talk about health that much in medicine. We talk about, there's no such thing as health care. It's disease care in the model that's been set up in our culture, and turning that upside down and saying, well, how do we promote health, is actually a radical concept.
Mm-hmm. I know. In a lot of ways, I feel very blessed to have gone to chiropractic school, because I feel like my training was quite different from that allopathic model that you're
I think
sharing.
That's true. I think osteopaths and chiropractors and acupuncturists start with a premise that there is an inherent health within the body, or a health potential in the body. And it's not that fear-based model that my Western medical training was profoundly steeped in, And I think for chiropractic, it really starts, I think that happens because it's body-based. As opposed to, I don't know, it took me so long to get out of the model that I was conditioned in. It was really hard to decondition myself, because I feel like children forced me out of that model of being a label gun and The faster I could diagnose someone, the more pats on the back I got for being smart, until I realized it was insulting, limiting, and, not rewarding. There's a reason why the burnout rate for doctors is so high, because if you spend your day just putting people in boxes, it's a horrible way to live.
Mm-hmm. Right. It really is. So you started your career as a pediatrician. You went on to receive your subspecialty in developmental pediatrics. And it sounds like, like you mentioned, that the children in your practice were your teacher. So tell us a little bit about your story and how you've come to this place.
Well, so, I've always had an interest from a very young age in Eastern philosophy and martial arts and Zen meditation and things like that. So that was always in the background, even when I was in, the bowels of the city hospitals on call. I'd be sitting reading, Zen poetry and things like that. And so this was my meditation practice was always there, but it got really closed off because of the fear-based model I was trained in. I was kind of on track to become a neurologist, and then I realized that it was just so deadening to me, and I was drawn to child development because it was a multidisciplinary model, which I really, really liked. That you could be in a room talking about a kid from a position of his potential or her potential with a psychologist, a social worker, a PT, an OT, cranial sacral, all these different people. And to me, that was really empowering and a very different model than doctor at the head of some ship barking orders to everybody else. So what I got really interested in back in the late 80s and early 90s was how chronic physical illness affects development. That was my thing. And already you can hear that that's kind of a relatively holistic way of thinking about things, because in the West, we separate the mind and the body so often, and I was looking at how the two are infused in each other, right? And so I became the medical director of a rehab hospital for kids, a skilled nursing facility, part of St. Mary's, at the time, where we could take children with chronic illnesses, asthma, diabetes, prematurity, kids who were stuck in hospitals, and move them up to the country. And I virtually lived with these kids in this, and could develop a program there. And I saw something then that changed my life. I had the opportunity to develop programs, brought in a nutritionist, and but I had all this time with these kids with chronic, on chronic steroids for asthma, who were in and out of ERs and ICUs. And so every morning I started doing breathing exercises with them out in the front of this beautiful place in Ossining, New York. And lo and behold, I saw these kids come off all their meds for the first time in years. And that kind of blew my mind, like I went running back to the pulmonology department and I said, "You're not going to believe this. I've got these kids off all their meds." And they didn't believe me because it was so out of their fear-based model that it just did not compute. And so that opened up an interest, a curiosity in Chinese medicine because of this idea of breath work as a healing modality. And, I lasted 3 years as the medical director, and then I really got burnt out because I'd get these kids tuned up beautifully over a few months, and then I'd send them back into the city and they'd be sick again. And it was just tearing my heart out. I actually got physically sick because I couldn't bear to give them the gift and then send them back to hell. And I couldn't change the environment in the city. So I went on to start a pediatric practice. I still had my developmental practice. And in the pediatric practice, which exploded, it grew. We were in the right place at the right time. We started this general pediatric practice, and it grew very quickly. And I really got kids to show me what health looks like, as opposed to the disease model where I'm the specialist diagnosing things. People come to me only with their problems. This was also answering questions and helping guide parents so that they could be the expert on their kid, so that I'm not the expert. And there's something liberating when I step back and say, you know your kid better than I will ever know your kid. How can I support you on that, right? As opposed to the arrogance of me after 15 minutes saying I know your kid better, right? So what happened was then I had my own kids, and something pivotal happened. It kind of blew my mind. My second kid was completely different personality than my first. And no one prepared me for that. And
oh, interesting. Do you have siblings?
Well, they're just different. And and I kept saying to everybody, that must mean something. But nobody could tell me what it means. And, I started studying temperament research, and parents in the practice were doing that too, saying, how come Billy's not doing what Jimmy did when he was 2? All this comparative stuff where there was no pediatric training to answer it. The answer was, oh, they're just different. But I felt like that must mean something in a deep, deep wiring sense, that there is some destiny speaking through these qualities. And that would open up the world of Chinese medicine on a deeper level, where I started studying with my dear friends Harriet Beinfield and Ephraim Korngold, who wrote Between Heaven and Earth. And they became mentors to me and opened up a world of study of this deeper 5-element, 5-phase way of understanding the gift of each child, the qualities that make them unique, that are based on the forces of nature. Wood power is spring power, correlates with this kind of high energy driven physicality, competitive nature. Fire power is this bright light in the room, the life of the party, charismatic, joyful kids. Earth is kind of harvest, the time of gathering, the peacemaker, the kid who wants everybody to get along, team player. Metal or gold power, which is the child who's very particular about order and rules and systems, the architect, the designer, really high quality, high moral sense of right and wrong. And the water power, winter, the quality of deep, old soul, introspective, quiet, keeps to themselves. And without pathologizing one over the other, without saying one is better than the other, recognizing not only do they each have some gift to give the world, but that there is a relationship between them. And that changed my whole approach to raising kids and to teaching and empowering parents.
Stephen, so I know, I've had Dr. Shafali on here. She talks about conscious parenting and how our children are our biggest teachers because they do trigger us, and it's an opportunity for us to grow as an individual by having that reflection and that trigger right in front of us. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I think that is my whole way of understanding the gift of children, that how children transform our lives, is this idea that they push our buttons because they've been studying us from the moment they're born, and they're looking for inconsistencies, and because they're looking to grow, to understand how to navigate life, they're looking to us as role models. And so when they push our buttons, there are growth buttons. They're asking us to grow out of love for them. And when we're open to growing, we don't have to get it right the first time, right? We get to say we're on a journey together. And so when we give thanks to the button pusher that pisses us off and drives us nuts and does all these things that seem insane, here you are, an adult, and you're sitting on the floor getting frustrated with your kid, it's kind of bringing you to your knees of humility and opening you up to the possibilities of growth. When a child sees you open to growing, they grow. So there is this quality of passing on this teaching, being open to teaching both yourself and your child. And it's the spirit of inquiry. It's this. What I teach my students is walking into a room with a new patient and not knowing what's going on and saying, well, I don't know. Let's find out together, right? That opens up multiple possibilities. When you do that with your child, when they ask a question, you say, I don't know, let's figure this out together. When they're in a crisis, when they're having a problem, when they see a parent openly willing to figure things out and not feeling the pressure to have to know the answer to everything, it takes the heat off the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And it promotes what's called growth mind thinking, which is Carol Dweck's work, as opposed to fixed mind thinking, which we know from all the research that she did on mindset that fixed mind thinking limits success.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of open, process-driven thinking that we're in it together, we're a team, we're going to figure it out. That's the best way of engaging a child in the journey, whether it's an illness or an emotional crisis or some adversity that's bound to happen, some bump in the road. It's that openness of inquiry, of creativity that keeps everybody curious, that makes a loving relationship very rich, because it means that you are not done growing. I was just teaching in San Diego, and I asked the group, it was a big group, and I asked them, how many of you have kids? And half of them raised their hand. And then I asked them, how many of you work with kids? And another group raised their hand. And I said, how many of you were kids? And everybody laughs. And then I said, how many of you still are kids? And very few people raised their hand. I said, oh boy, we have a lot of work to do here.
Right.
Because that child power, that child curiosity, this is the gift that children have given me, to keep that alive in me. The playful.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is so true. So as a parent, I feel like for me, having a 2-year-old son, being really conscious that I'm not the boss, right? I mean, and he loves watching the show Boss Baby, which is pretty funny. It's really recognize that we're partners, we're team. Like there's a role as a parent to guide, I think. But at the end of the day, it's not about me controlling him. It's not about me dictating, everything in his life. It's really about figuring it out together. And I don't have all the answers. And I think when I can put my ego aside and really be like, hey, we're equals here. I think that's, to your point, like really deepening a loving parenting relationship.
Yeah, let's take a real example. One of the classics I get, and we have a bunch of these classic questions, is how do I get my kid to eat better, right? Mm-hmm. Or get my kid to eat. And so I love that because it already is creating a hierarchy, right? It's already setting up something where you're supposed to get your kid to eat, which is a problem already. There's already an authority imbalance here. But, who's in charge of eating? I get that you want, and I can reflect back and say, okay, I get it, that you want your child to eat a healthy diet. But, where's the trust there, right? Where is the dignity of saying, Susan Johnson has done all the research on this and shown in beautiful research that kids, when given the opportunity to eat, healthy food, will self-regulate at 2 and 3 years of age, right?
And even younger, even babies, yeah.
Even babies, right? But you have to be able to say, I'm getting the Oreos out of the house because if they're in the
Right.
house, that's crack cocaine for a baby. Why would they? How can you blame them for wanting it? Because it's like pure. It's not real food, right? So if you have
Right.
healthy food in the house and they don't feel like eating, okay, that's an embodied experience. I would much rather a child know hunger and recognize that food serves a purpose than eating because it's time to eat, which is a disembodied way.
Yeah, there's an innate intelligence that we all possess to eat the foods that we need those nutrients at this moment, right? So it's like eating spinach because my body needs calcium right now, and having that intuition that that's what I'm craving. And even, the books I read when I was looking to introduce solid foods to my son at 6 months said that you put these healthy foods in front of him and he'll pick the ones that he needs at this moment based on the nutrients.
Exactly. And being comfortable with that, not putting an overlay on top of that of shoulds, right? He
Right.
should eat X, Y, and Z. Backing away from that rule based authority, which creates a disequilibrium or an imbalance of power, because then the kid is going to push back. And once you get into a power play over food, it's a disaster for the rest of their life. So we
Mm,
want to back away from that and show that we trust this child, get him into the
right.
process of cooking, to see the adventure of where the food's coming from. All of these things that make it a team sport is much healthier way of having, all these unhealthy habits of eating can be trusted. You can develop good habits when it's grounded in this kind of deep collaboration model, which goes back to an ancient, hunter-gatherer time where eating was a time for, connecting, right? There are 5 reasons we eat. We eat for fuel. We eat because we're hungry. We eat for bonding. We eat for pleasure, right? For an entertainment. We eat for the kind of spiritual sacredness. We give thanks, right? These 5 are supposed to come together at every meal. And it was a gathering time, and you de-stress that way, right? But when it's just a kind of pit stop at gas station, fill it up, it's not a healthy attitude. And then you have obesity or anorexia, the 2 extremes of distorted body image related to food.
And digestive distress, because we need to be in the parasympathetics when we're resting and digesting. And if we're stressed about eating, then we're going to be overly sympathetic and our body isn't going to be able to utilize and break down the food appropriately.
Exactly. You get inflammation in the very place where you want to be absorbing nutrients. You can't because you're in a fight or flight state.
Right.
Exactly. The
Yeah.
same is true with the questions I get. How do I get my kid to sleep better? How do I get my kid to exercise more? How do I get my kid to deal with his emotions strong? These are the common questions. But if we don't approach it in a collaborative, empowered way, we set those up to become pathologies, right? Chronic pathologies, and we can prevent them
Yeah.
by certainly setting up from the very beginning a healthy relationship with our teacher, our child.
Right. And I do also find a lot of it is modeling. Like when parents ask me similar questions, it's like, oh, my child won't eat vegetables. I'm like, well, are you eating vegetables? My son, honestly, when I'm eating dinner, he's usually already have eaten by that point, but he wants to sit on my lap and he wants to eat whatever's on my plate. So ideally, I'm, eating nourishing food, and I am happy to share a couple bites with him, and it is very like bonding for us. But the whole point is that together as a family, if we're eating and then once again we don't have junk in our house, then why is he's not going to want the junk because it's not around, right? I think that's the key there.
Right. Well, there's another piece to this, with kids who are suspicious about food, which happens somewhere around a year. There's a stranger anxiety that develops, including around food, which is a normal, healthy, protective device that is wired into our system. So you're not eating the bad mushrooms on the floor when your mother is, not paying attention to you, right? It's driven. But what I've part of this relationship training that Chinese medicine really speaks about to me in raising healthy, holistic kids is this idea of empathy, right? So if a kid is locked in and doesn't want to eat what you want them to eat, one of the ways around it is like you said, let them sit on your lap and watch you eat and enjoy your food. And he's picking up on the energy within you of your joy in the food. But another is let him feed you.
Right, he does.
And that opens up.
It's so
They're
cute.
studying that. Yeah, but that's a beautiful empathy training moment where he doesn't have to eat it, but he can give it to you. And that love that he's giving to you is going to open a door to exploring those foods eventually. Because it's a love-based, giving-based model of role modeling, and it's empowering him. He gets to feed you, and I've had this with parents who come in and they say, my kid's not paying attention in school. And half the time they're on their phone while they're telling me this. And I say, yeah, duh,
Oh, wow.
You're not paying attention.
Right. Oh, it's so funny. It really goes back to that, how children are just such a reflection, of our behaviors. And, if we want to see different behavior, then we really have to look at ourselves first.
Well, but that's the beauty. That's what I mean by the teacher, the spiritual teacher being the child, is demanding that you take a good look at yourself. What better spiritual? You don't need to go on a retreat with the Dalai Lama. You've got your Dalai Lama sitting on your lap.
That's so cool. So I love, we're going to have some moms listening and dads listening into this recording, and they're going to want to know, let's say their child does have a chronic illness. And, and this is what you see, I know, a lot in your office. What kind of advice could you give to that parent about how to support their child in not being stuck in that chronic diagnosed condition?
Yeah. It's a great question, and it's one of the questions that doesn't get asked enough. The first thing I like to unpack with parents who come to me with kids suffering from chronic or recurrent problems is that the model of acute care medicine, which saves lives in the emergency room, does not work for this. It's the wrong tool. It's using a hammer as a screwdriver. It doesn't work. So already we have to get out of the acute care or the emergency medicine model for trying to solve something that is chronic, right? And so that's the first step.
Right.
Let's move away from that model of fixing emergencies and move into, all right, what does it mean to have something that is so-called chronic or something that is at a deeper level? Well, the approach has to involve the new tool that we have to use to address it has to be inherently more system-based or holistic. So we're not dividing mind and body. We're not dividing the digestive system from the immune system. We're not dividing the nervous system from the digestive system. We're not dividing the heart, right, the emotional base of us from our physical well-being. We're looking at where all these things come together. This is the step into understanding how to turn around something that's been given to parents as a diagnosis, as some kind of chronic label, right? Because once you open up the world of chronic problems, the most important thing to recognize is there's no one asthma, there's no one autism, there's no one ADD. There are multiples. They're just symptom presentations with multiple different causes and multiple different ways of approaching it. One size does not fit all. That's how you walk. That's the doorway into, helping parents grapple with it, because they're often these labels become like death sentences to parents. They're devastated when they're given a label of autism or Crohn's disease or whatever, because it sounds like it's one thing. And to unpack that, we have to go deeper. And the deeper at the core of that is, who is your child? Another way of asking it is, what's right with your child, before asking what's wrong with your child. Because what I find is, then once you understand the core temperament style, or what I call their secret power, this motivating force within them, you can orient all the different things, whether it's diet or sleep or exercise or movement or mindfulness exercises or homeopathy or chiropractics or whatever, massage techniques. You can orient them around a core center that is child specific, and you get more bang for your buck.
Right.
You can turn a big ship much easier, big ship being a chronic illness, when you've identified first who the child is, as opposed to trying to turn the big ship of asthma or the big ship of autism around without identifying the core person inside. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that's so beautiful. It's really respecting that child as an individual, and it's really about what are their specific needs, and those needs, like to your point, vary from child to child, even with the same quote unquote diagnosis. Right? The diagnosis doesn't explain who that child is or define them.
Right. And it doesn't actually go deeper to look at the subtypes of that particular diagnosis that are oriented around these different kids. Take ADD. It's sort of the classic. ADHD, my book is really the revelation of that. It, for me, was that there is no one ADHD. There are probably 10 types, but there are at least 5 that I get into in the book that are oriented around different styles of paying attention, different interests, right? Different expressions of spirit, right? And when you get kids to start being empowered and getting their gift, their power to work for them, to compensate for the blind spots and the areas of difficulty, you get the opportunity to ask a couple of really interesting questions that play into, a lot of the work I'm doing now at Tournesol Kids, the nonprofit, which is asking, well, what would it look like if everyone in a community was able to play to their strengths and help each other with their blind spots, right? What would that look like? What would the community look like if everybody's honored for their gift, for the dignity of who they are first, that they have different learning styles, that they have different capacities, different ways of expressing their emotions? How would growth be potentiated, right? How would the environment change in our world? What kind of adults would they be? Now that I've done this for so long, for me, I've been doing this for 35 years, so I've got to see all these kids grow up and become parents. And I wasn't prepared for that. That kind of learning kind of blew me away, because to see things full circle, where the kid that I took care of is now asking questions about the kid that they have, gives me a kind of arc of a life that it shows me this larger level of what society is made up of, and how we can influence society by working with children and empowering them. And so Tournesol Kids, for me, was this way of saying, let's bring this into the classroom and change the culture of the classroom so that learning is a much more fully embodied thing. It's a big challenge for me. I know schools are hungry for it, but they're also highly resistant to it because they're so time constrained. So much pressure on teachers these days, with curriculums and standardized teaching model. But, to create a change in our society and a change in our attitudes about our environment and about who we are and the dignity of each and every one, and to heal the invisible space between us. That's what my end game is in my life. This is what I'm dedicating the rest of my life to.
Wow, it's beautiful. I was hoping you could go into a little more detail about the Tournesol Kids nonprofit that you're the medical director for.
Yeah, so Carrie Davidson and I started this a number of years ago with the hope of employing some of the things that I teach one-on-one with parents and with kids, generalizing that in some way in families, in group settings, particularly schools, where I find, if you have a 2-year-old now, so you have time with your child, but once they go to school, you have like an hour in the morning and a couple of hours at night, right? And so you have this like bulk of the time when a kid starts school where their growing is taking place somewhere else. And we're abdicating that. And I want to make sure that that is a quality growth place for all the things other than math, science, and reading, which are important, don't get me wrong, but they're, maybe half the story, maybe, of what makes a full bodied, loving human being with healthy relationships.
How do you do that in schools?
Well, what I did was I created a series, I gamified all of these ideas. I made games out of them that are 5-minute games. I made up these cards. If you go to tkids.org, t-kids.org, you can check them out. And the idea is that you can just I want to insinuate these into the classroom. Now, the higher model here that plays off what you and I have been talking about is that the child is the teacher. So the model is based on the model I learned when I was a resident, which is see one, do one, teach one. So the goal is not for me to go into schools teaching kids or teaching teachers, but for older kids, teenagers, let's say, to be taught or empowered to be trained in these sort of basic games of, empathy training and mindfulness training and executive function training and healthy body awareness training, all these basic things, all through games. And they teach them to the young kids. Because
Yeah.
that little kids really look up to big kids.
Right.
They're cool. They're way cooler than us old bogies.
Right.
So I want it to be a win-win on both ends because the teenager has a purpose in their life and the young kid is learning from this cool kid about all of these empowerments of what it means to be mind, body, spirit whole. All through games. Here, I'll give you a better example. Ready? I'm going to give you a simple example. Because otherwise we're talking too high and your listeners will say, what the hell is he talking about? So here's a simple example. Ready? So in Chinese medicine, earth power, which is the harvest time of the year, which just passed, before autumn, it's a time, it's the 5th season, it's the gathering time, it's the time of ripening, it's the time of coming together and sharing, right? So at the ground floor level, it's about eating. In Chinese medicine, the model, the metaphor is eating. And so all the dietary information we want to translate is through gathering together to eat as one, right? But during that time, the highest level or the kind of neocortical high level spiritual development or executive function training is about empathy. And the link between them is what I call conversation, the skill of sharing words around the dinner table or mealtime. Okay, so these all align. Eating, earth, conversation, and empathy. And so the game is called the high five game. You want to play?
Yes.
Okay, so hold up your hand.
Okay.
So if you look at your hand, the thumb is who, the forefinger is where, because we're pointing with that one. The middle finger is when, the ring finger is how, and the pinky is why. So now, Laura, ask me a question, any one of those. But make it personal. I'm not Siri. I'm not Alexa. I'm not downloading information. You just ask me a personal question. Who, where, when, how, or why.
Where did you go this weekend?
Perfect. So I spent the weekend actually at home, except for a short bout to Home Depot, because I'm working on a children's book for someone that I'm designing and illustrating. So now connect a second question. You use the where. Use a second question of those to connect to the first one.
Why are you illustrating a children's book?
Beautiful. So now we're going a little deeper into I'm feeling cared for by you. You're staying curious about me. Because my nephew is turning 1, and this is a very powerful kid in our family. Not my nephew, my grandnephew. And I wrote this children's story 6 months ago, and I've been intending. I do a lot of these children's illustration books. There's one coming out very shortly about these 5 powers, actually. Anyway, and this one is, a sweet one that I want to give him for his birthday. Okay, now a third one. You want to get all 5 questions to get the high five. So ask me a third question.
So I did where and I did why.
Mm-hmm.
So
who, when, and how left.
Who is the main character in your book?
The main character in the book is called Little Man, or maybe the main character in the book is the sea, the ocean.
Okay.
So give me one more. And you got the idea now. We're actually at the dinner table when you play this game. And it's the child who's asking the questions. That's the empowerment. It's not being grilled on how was your day, kid, which is the FBI asking questions. It's the other way around. It's the empowerment of the child asking questions of you and staying curious about your world. That's empathy. That's the core of empathy. Because you're going to understand my needs. Already, Laura, you understand something about me by just the 3 of the 5 questions you asked me. You and your listeners already learned something about my character. And it's
and this is really I love it. This is about connection.
Yep. So that's a good example of, so I designed like 52 cards that are different games for growing each of these kind of metaphors of power, metal, wood, fire, water, that play out at different levels of our hierarchy, ground floor, which is the body intelligence level, emotional intelligence level, limbic system, and neocortical level, or what we call cognitive development or cognitive intelligence or spiritual development. So there are meditations in there, there's all kinds of fun things. And I'm trying to get them insinuated into the day-to-day stuff, breaks in the schools. It's a fight. I have to tell you, it's very hard because, I want this to be a very low-cost thing that's done through the people in the schools, right? So that it's not some outside person coming in to save the day. It's homegrown, and it can be adapted to the needs of a particular community. So, it's a new project, so we're just getting off the ground, but I'm really dedicated to it because I feel like it's the bigger picture of growing relationships of community. And I feel like there's a real opportunity to up the game, to move away from the factory model of medicine and the factory model of education in our culture.
Yeah. And that is really
Yeah.
like turning the Titanic, right?
Yeah,
it's a big task.
I'm aware of that, and I'm okay with it. I know it's going to be
Yeah.
hard. I'm
Yeah.
not frustrated by it. I'm not surprised that it's going to be hard. Look, many years ago, there was a woman, Susan Rubin, who asked me to participate in something. I was her kid's pediatrician. She's a nutritionist who did this great project that became a movie called Two Angry Moms. And I'm actually in the movie at one point. But what we tried to do in Westchester is change the culture of school food. This is about
Hmm.
20, more than 20 years ago. And quite frankly, it was a disaster because the resistance to changing the food in school was like overwhelmingly, pushback wherever we went. Nobody wanted to give up on their cheese doodles. No one wanted to be told what their kid should eat. Everybody used every example, it's going to cost too much money and all these things that are actually proven not to be true.
Right.
So I had the experience of knowing that there's going to be resistance, but learning to lower resistance is simply understanding people are insecure. And our job is everybody gets resistant when they're insecure. It's a defensive model. And so using compassion to support people when they're feeling insecure is a loving way of bringing them around eventually. How long that takes depends on the level of insecurity within the system, right? There's a
Right.
simple,
Change is scary.
yeah, so there's a simple equation that we can use. Ready? Here's the equation I tell parents. C, the letter C, times R equals S. Okay? So C is the challenge. And really, it's the challenge of change. They're both C. R is the resistance to that challenge. And they're multiplied, they're not additive. So if the challenge is changing food in school or getting your kid to eat, and the resistance is, 3 times that, you've got an amplification. S is the level of suffering at any given time that you're experiencing. So if we want to reduce suffering, you can't change the challenges. All you can do is reduce the resistance. And that takes a loving, patient, kind hearted approach, not forceful. It requires understanding of where someone's at. When they have a reason to resist, they don't feel safe. And so our job is to help them feel safe first.
Wow, this is like basic nervous system. Like, yeah, the body and mind will do whatever to like protect the individual, right?
Exactly. You get it so well because you live it, right? You walk the walk. But you'd be surprised how people, you know, tend to use blame against that and shame when it's just the body trying to defend itself, trying to find a safe
Yeah.
haven when they
Just
feel
trying to stay
threatened or
alive.
scared. Yep, exactly.
Wow, that's amazing. Where can people get those flashcards of the games? Is that available on your website?
Yeah, it's right on the website. They can, in fact, now what we did is you don't even have to get the hard copies; they can be downloaded.
At
You know,
tkids.org.
t-kids,
Mm-hmm.
t-kids.org.
Cool. So that's really cool. Like you said, you can even just download it and use it at home. And this is also a good tool. Like in my area, here in Hoboken, Jersey City, New Jersey, there's lots of private schools, and this is something I could see. They might be a little more open to utilizing this other ways of learning. Um, I don't know, than public schools. Do you find that case when you're dealing with
Not
schools?
necessarily. Not
No.
necessarily. So the private schools
Okay.
have their own, pushback for their own reasons. But it's What I want to do with this, I kind of want it to go viral out there in the world and let people adapt it, even if they use parts of it. It doesn't have to be the whole
Right.
system. I want it to be,
Right.
but it doesn't have to be. If there's something you can take from it and use in your home or in your church or in your school, make it so. Every little bit is a seed that germinates naturally. And it comes back in growth potential in dividends, right? It's that's really what I know. This is tried and true because I've done it for so many years in my practice, and I've helped so many parents see this as a growth potential journey. So I know these things work. Plus, they're time tested. All of this goes back thousands of years. It's
Right.
not like rocket science. It's not like some new thing. It's all
No.
very much common sense. And like you said, Laura, it's based in the nervous system. So you can trust that it's going to work. It's just employing it, finding opportunities. I think teachers will find their job is more enjoyable when they take breaks and do these little 5-minute exercises.
I would think so. I mean, you're really it's allowing deeper connection, whether it's the parent child, the teacher child, whoever that relationship may be with, right? And when you have a deeper trusting relationship, then you're going to have more success.
Well, one of the most basic pieces of it is not assuming all kids should be learning at exactly the same pace, right? Because sometimes the smartest kid is the slowest. Already that changes the dialogue that education is not a race, not a race to the finish line, that it's a process, which is growth mind, right? Which is that the water child moves slowly and thinks deeply and is kind of the dreamer. And he's not going to respond to the material in the same way as the wood kid who's kinesthetically charged and wants to do it himself to learn it. Two different ways of teaching. Imagine a classroom where we can honor all those different ways and each can teach the other kid and share that, because ultimately we need all five within ourselves to be well-rounded. That gives us, we have an orienting temperament style, but we need all of them within us to make ourselves ensure our own success. And understanding that systems approach, I find, makes the education model a much more enticing, empowering experience rather than, the teacher meeting saying there's something wrong with your kid or, this kind of label fear-based model. It's just trying to shift the whole mindset.
Right. It's interesting. This topic has been coming up a lot with my past few guests, that it is really about empowerment and it's about moving away from that fear-based model, whether it's health or education or really any decision that we make in our lives, right? And when we are making places from education and feeling empowered, it's not being coerced, it's not being controlled by others around us, and that would be applicable to children and adults.
Right. Exactly, well said. To me, the highest purpose that we want to bring out in our children, what we're aiming for is this high level of kind of meaning in our lives that has to do with insight and creativity, water, freedom, wood, joy or celebration, fire, harmony, earth, and grace or gratitude, metal, gold. And when those are engaged at our highest level of our journey, whether we're sick or well, when we use this model of what are we aiming for in our life? What you have a 2-year-old, what are we aiming for? What are we growing towards, right? There's a purpose to life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it just makes the whole thing a much bigger picture. One of the things I've found working with parents is when I lay out a big picture for them, let's take a real example. A kid has the flu, right? And I've been in the community and I see, what the course of the flu. You get sick, you have a fever for a couple of days, you cough, you're disgustingly phlegmy, you feel like crap, and then you start getting better after about 5 or 6 days. Just laying out the model of the 5 or 6 days comforts people because it's big picture thinking. Whenever we charge up the neocortex to see the big picture, we downregulate the fight or flight system. When we can step back from the emergency and see the big picture, which is what all of this is that we're talking about, everybody grounds themselves. The parasympathetic nervous system has a chance to ground us because big picture thinking is actually the gift of humanity. It's our highest order of development, is to be able to imagine a future, be able to tell our story, right? Be able to care for others, be able to see joy in the world, be able to have gratitude for what we've got. All of these high-level gifts are based in imagination. And I want to unlock that in every single parent and child. Most of the torture of medicine is a lack of imagination.
Wow. That just blew my mind.
And I did my job.
I love it. I'm eating this all up.
Yeah, I can feel you, even though we're not in the same room, I can feel you resonating with this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a beautiful thing because we're kindred spirits right now, right? We're on the same frequency.
Yes. Wow. So you shared so much wisdom today for our listeners to soak up. Do you have any last thoughts that you'd like to leave us with?
I don't know. That's a really good question. Do you have any last thoughts?
Oh, you're putting me in the hot seat.
Well, I think the best thing I could say is a quality of inspiration. Is this? It's not false hope to believe in your child's potential.
Mm-hmm.
That our belief system is the beginning point of unlocking potentiality and possibilities that will play out in actions and results that lead to success. And so check your belief first.
Wow.
How's that?
That was amazing. I actually had dreams when I was pregnant with my son that he was going to be president of the United States. And I found myself being like, oh my God, you're being ridiculous, Laura. Like you had this idea of grandeur. And I was like, yeah, I'm like, why am I limiting my son's potential? And it's not, for me, it wasn't coming from a place of ego. Like I want to be the mother of a president. It was more like, this is what is possible for him. And why am I going to limit that possibility?
Right. Exactly right. What I'd really like to do, Laura, let's do this again, because I had really fun doing it, because we can go deeper on all these different little points that we touched upon, and we can make it really practical. And, if your listeners are interested and they have a particular question, I'll come back and do it again.
Oh, I would absolutely love that. That sounds great. So people listening in, if you have specific questions that you'd love to have covered, we'll get another episode scheduled and do this, because we could certainly talk for hours.
Yeah, and it's fun. I like doing that. As long as it's my day off, I'll do it.
Yeah, I love it. So, Stephen, once again, thank you so much for taking your time out to come in and share and connect. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure, real pleasure. Thank you, Laura.